this computer. Okay. So bandhas are an interesting concept that we don't really have a concept for. There's no good translation for bandhas in the West. And so what it is it's a bond or a lock, an energy lock. And so what you could say about a bandha is it's a way of directing, concentrating, directing, and concentrating and directing and holding an energy, a directional energy flow. So in practical terms, Mula Bandha, the root lock, is lifting the pelvic floor. Now we talk about this, it's not just one thing. So there is what they call the perennial body, which is a bundle of nerves, is 2 inches above the pelvic floor that you can engage. And there's, benefits that come from that. It also, of course, it is in the key or the frequency of the sex organs, the organs of elimination, the what they call Ashwini and Vajroli mudra. So that's why the bandhas and the mudras are often talked about together, is because this Ashwini and Vajroli, Ashwini, easy enough to remember, is squeezing the anus, and Vajroli is engaging the urogenital muscles. So between that is this Mula Bandha. And so certainly involved in that Mula Bandha is this relationship, the Ashwini, the Vajroli, even though they're separate and they're specified, it's part of this ability to start to activate and control and bring awareness to these parts of our lives, our body, that were previously unconscious. So we're bringing that at the same time. Then that Mula Bandha, that pelvic floor lift, an activation is a hormonal activation. It's an awareness, and then it brings us up into this what we call Uddiyana Bandha. And so these two are related. The Uddiyana Bandha means flying V, and so let's see here. The flying V is the rib cage. As you pull the belly up into that rib cage, you have this upward flying V. So on an exhale, your Uddiyana Bandha is to, just trying to get in front of the computer here. This is kind of ridiculous, but you're going to exhale the air from the lungs and then pull the belly in. So that's Uddiyana Bandha, like proper. Now, but what do you do if you're on an inhale? Can you engage Uddiyana Bandha? And so that Uddiyana Bandha on an inhale is the engaging and the shortening of the abdominal muscles. So the space between the belt line and the bottom of the rib cage shortens, abdominal muscles engage. Now this is like when we were talking about the proper way to do Utkatasana, or we were talking about doing a squat, right? How to do a squat. You want to do it, we say lift with your legs, not your back, right? So we want to do it so that we have the quadriceps, the glutes, and the abdominal muscles engaged. And so when we engage this Uddiyana Bandha, it does a couple things. One, it taps us into that system. So that's like the muscles that alternates back and forth. Abdominals connected with glutes, connected with quadriceps, as opposed to hamstrings, hip flexors, low back. And then two, it's the I'm forgetting the word, the opposite muscles. There's a word for that. But it's the opposite muscles from the back. And so when you engage your abdominal muscles, we've talked about this too, that gives a chance of the back muscles to work less. and so that you can protect that lumbar spine by engaging your abdominal muscles. So this would be something that if you're going to lift something heavy, you'd want to consciously engage your glutes and your abs and then lift with your legs instead of using your back. So this is utilized in the course of the asana practice. It's a good practice. And so a lot of this cues that you hear us talking about, take the sway out of the back, or a lot of tuck tailbone, is to encourage people to engage this kind of core system of support. And if we don't, sometimes we learn the hard way. We can exhaust our other system of low back, hip flexors, and hamstrings, and then you have like injury. Sometimes people pull a hamstring or hurt the low back, or hip flexors is another one that is commonly injured. So we do these things in a really practical sense, engaging opposing muscle groups. So this is a technical description of the bandhas would be to say that we're engaging opposing muscle groups. So all of the bandhas are kind of sphincters in some sense. It's like a sphincter. It's like this ability that we have to squeeze in. And so the basic direction that we start to practice with the bandhas is to draw in and up. Now this has to do with, Kundalini, drawing in and up to be in a good way, and to be directing that energy upwards. But there is also a piece to it too, which is if you want energy to flow, what do? Do you squeeze or relax? Okay, of course we relax. We want energy to flow, you relax. Squeezing constricts prana. And so we practice engaging the bandhas until we have a sense of that this is a system. This is part of who we are, that we have access to. Now, we can talk about the physical bandhas. Physically, the bandhas are important. They prevent injury in your practice. So engaging the physical bandhas in your practice prevents injury. Metaphysically, spiritually, the bandhas are concentration. It is psychic self-defense. So the bandhas would be appropriate if your energy was scattered, right? Or if your energy was being drained. Right? Sometimes we might take into consideration, why am I so tired? What's going on? And not realize, oh my God, I have a vampire in my life, right? Okay, well, now what happens if we engage the bandhas? How can we engage the bandhas? They say mosquitoes can't bite you if the bandhas are engaged. You tell me. Too bad it's not summer to do this experiment, right? But, noticing these types of things is when we're in a confrontation or when we're in an argument or whatever, what happens when you engage the bandhas, drawing in and up. And of course, too, then, as we start to become aware of the bandhas, what happens when we relax the bandhas. So this pathway that we're talking about physically, as along the spine, the pelvic floor, we talked about Uddiyana Bandha, navel draws in, and the third one is Jalandhara, which is described as a tuck of the chin, long through the back of the neck, and also the ability to open and close the throat. Your Jalandhara Bandha, throat lock. So you can close the flow of air so that the breath doesn't flow anymore. You can hold the breath at the top, these different types of ways. So this is Jalandhara Bandha. So these are the three bandhas, Mula, Uddiyana, and Jalandhara. And then the fourth one is called Maha, and it's to engage all three of these simultaneously and focus on the Supreme. So, of course, the spine, what we're calling the spine physically, corresponds to the pathway of how infinite awareness comes into manifestation and then is directed into this entanglement identification with an individual karmic situation, and then through our role, our desires, and to the body. And so this Kundalini locks in at root, which is why you're alive, right? Why you're identified with this particular body. But then what happens, of course, in this Kundalini theory is somehow Kundalini gets awakened. Kundalini sees, whoa, how could I have experienced that if I'm this limited self? Or Kundalini becomes curious. And so then as this process starts to happen, this attraction to mystery, this curiosity, this awakening of Kundalini starts to unfold, and then our perspective ever expands. And so one of the purposes of the Bandhas is this practice of also awakening Kundalini and directing the energy. So it's like creating like a suction to kind of suck energy up and then relax it. So to work with and be able to direct the energies along the spine. Now, in the end, the physical bandhas, so a pretty crude way to do that, right? But then the physical practice of the bandhas teaches us about this capacity that we have to work with the subtle. And so that's the same thing as in our asana practice. The gross practice of asana is just exercise. But as we go through the practice more and more and more, and even pratyahara, our asana, and recognize that it's, oh, wow, this whole practice is in my mind, it becomes ever more subtle. And then pretty soon we realize that we're on the battlefield just like Arjuna, and this is the practice of embodying the totality of who you are in this moment. It's nothing short of this is what they call the battle between good and evil, or the battle between God and ego, right? Good and evil, God and ego, right? The devil, the ego, that angel, your heart, your consciousness. So this is a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about mudras here. Now, Vajroli mudra, engaging the urogenital muscles, and Ashwini mudra, engaging the anus. These are very special mudras. A lot of times when people think of mudras, they think of like Anjali mudra, which is bringing the palms together at heart center, right? Or they think of Chin mudra, right? Which is in meditation to connect this circuit of energy. And so people do these different mudras, as many mudras as there are possibilities for the hands, and so we can start to see that like there's different ways, all of these different ways of being. There are circuitry, the body-mind is connected via the nervous system, and consciousness takes on a shape. And so the mudras are in some ways the spontaneous expression of consciousness, so that as consciousness takes on a shape, it is possible that the body expresses that consciousness. It happens very naturally. So that in the tradition, the highest expression of the awakened self, the awakened awareness, is this Nataraj, this cosmic dancer. To dance through, sorry about that, let me turn this off. To dance through life. And so these mudras are also associated with dance. But there's also the practice of doing a mudra, that by doing a mudra and holding the hands in a certain way, just like asana, it's associated with an awareness. Just like mantra. By repeating these mantric sounds, which are the distillation of the cosmic sound as perceived in deep meditation, the intention is that somehow we be drawn back to that frequency. Somehow it take us home. And so mudra is the same way. So what does this mean in your practice? One, practice bandhas. Practice engaging. That's pretty like it's effort and patriarchy and sattva and all of these things, like making this conscious effort. And then two, practice relaxing your bandhas and starting to build a relationship with these things. Now, first, when we first start practicing bandhas, we might be like, hey, I don't know what mula bandha is. So then practice squeezing your anus, right? Or practice your muscles you'd use to stop the flow of if you're in the middle of peeing and you wanted to stop the flow of pee, practice engaging those muscles. And all of these are great practices, and all of these are deep practices. So the same way we do a meditation practice or a mantra practice, someone else practices Vajroli, and that's their yoga practice. It sounds sometimes kind of like, whoa, that's their yoga practice in the West because of how we've been conditioned to think of what yoga is. But yes, that's their yoga practice. And people do all kinds of feats with their practice that you see that are the natural expression of repeating something again and again and again. So there is that. What else? Any questions so far about the mudras, the bandhas?
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, I mean, sometimes during an asana practice, I hear like, engage the bandhas. But I'm curious, and then in other classes, I've heard like pump the bandhas. And so I'm kind of wondering when you're supposed, like, is there like, not quote unquote a right, I know there's no right or wrong way, but like, is there a way that you're supposed to engage with bandhas during an asana practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so it depends on who you talk to, if you want to hear about what the right or the wrong way. But Pattabhi Joyce, I feel like, said, engage your bandhas all the time. Keep your bandhas engaged all the time. During your life. If you're not engaging your bandhas, being aware, engage the bandhas. Now, that might get a little bit old in some ways if you were really actually doing a practice like that. But probably what happens more often than not, I think I tried that back in the day, keeping the bandhas engaged all the time. And then you realize you just forget to engage the bandhas. And then it becomes a practice of mindfulness, like breath awareness or something. So we practice engaging the bandhas. And then that's a good way to get to know the bandhas. And it's like if someone told you, like, hey, guys, at the end of your arms, there are these things called hands. And you're like, hands? I've never heard of these things called hands. What are you talking about? I don't know what hands are. You're like, okay, just try squeezing them. And you're like, I kind of feel something. I kind of feel something. I don't know what it is. And then over time, yeah, okay, now practice squeezing your hands all the time. And then over time, what happened is, like, we get better and we're like, okay, I'm squeezing my hands. And then we learn how to relax our hands and then squeeze and relax. And like, so yeah, now we're pumping. And then next thing you know, you're playing the piano, right? All of these things. But that's the same thing with the bandhas, is that what we're describing is a subtle phenomenon, but instead of trying to describe how to do the subtle, what we do is we say engage, squeeze, right? Squeeze your body, squeeze these subtle, it is relatively subtle compared to most of the ways people usually think of the body. So, and what I can say is that the practice of the bandhas gets more and more subtle. But it's starting out, like, we may just be squeezing the anus. And I think that's a lot of times when Pattabhi Joyce would cue engaging the bandhas, he would cue squeezing the anus. So that's a good place to start until we're like, oh, okay, what else? Can I relax my anus and engage Mula Bandha? and I relax Vajroli and keep Mula Bandha engaged. So these are questions, not to answer tonight, but as you work with it over time and build a relationship with that, then that's the thing. So really it again comes down to practice the bandhas, and they will reveal themselves to you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're just conceptual. Otherwise it's just this conceptual thing. So I'm going to click over to give you a little bit more kind of philosophy around the bandhas. Let's do a screen share here. And we'll go to the whiteboard. And I'm going to draw. What is he drawing again? All right, so this is our Hatha Yoga triangle. So we're always doing this because this is a really good description of anatomy. Now we then have our yogi in here meditating. All right, little devoted sticker. So we have 3 chakras. We have 3 chakras here. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I say 3 chakras?
Mm-hmm.
Oops. No, there's 3 chakras that are involved. So there's 7 chakras, of course. And so here's our 7 chakras. Chakra means wheel. So our 7 wheels of energy, and these are places where the nadis cross. Remember, a chakra is where nadis cross, and it sets into motion a vortex. Now they're not physical, so this isn't in space-time. And so if we're trying to understand the chakras, they don't make sense in space-time. In space-time, how we observe them is as a connectedness between things that would otherwise not be connected, like internal organs and emotions and colors and frequencies and sounds and all of these things. And so it is like a scale, just like a musical scale that goes from low to high. There's no hierarchy. There is, in a sense, because the things that come from the top are unmanifest, and so they're unchanging. Whereas the things at the bottom, like the body, are conditional. And so this is the key of immortality up here. And then down here is all of this stuff dies. Right? So in this practice of awakening Kundalini is coiled. We want to, let's get that out. That actually looked like a Kundalini somehow. Let's get back to our thing. So we have here our Kundalini at the bottom, coiled below the base of the spine, meaning that we identify, generally speaking, with the body. Maybe if we're sophisticated, we also identify with our desires, our family, and our role. And so this is the ego. And ego meaning it's the false identity. It's the I, me, my. And we can recognize it because we'll use those words, I, me, my, to describe these things that even sometimes we unconsciously identify with. Like, is my daughter part of my ego?
Yes.
Yes, because I said my daughter, right? And so it's a practical thing, right? Having an identity. It's not a bad thing to have an identity and say, hey, that's my eyeglasses. Those are my eyeglasses, right? Those are your eyeglasses. And because we have different eyeglasses, it makes sense. You don't want my eyeglasses, and I don't want your eyeglasses. So these aren't horrible to have this context. But what's happened in the ego is that I identify and think that I am my daughter. And then this is like, or I am my son. And then it's like, son, you're going to play on the baseball team. I don't want to play baseball, Dad. I want to be a dancer. No son of mine is ever going to be a dancer, right? You've seen this played out in movies all the time where dad is trying to get son to like live out all the dreams he never did and feels entitled because he thinks his son is him. It creates a lot of confusion. Am I making this up?
No.
We've seen that movie. We've seen that play out. These are archetypes. So ego, I, me, my. And so when it's in a healthy way, it's used to identify and say, hey, those are my eyeglasses. That's my son. I take care of, you know, all this stuff. But realizing that it's not actually who I am. Like, these terms are practical. They're not who we really actually are. And so the practice of yoga is the practice of awakening this Kundalini energy, which happens all kinds of various ways. It happens through, you know, meditation. It happens through yoga practice. It happens through prayer, through religion. It happens through devotion. It happens through any type of really intense concentration. Any type of really intense concentration that brings us into the present moment. And Kundalini is awakened when it gets a glimpse of something it can't explain. Could be this moment. To get a glimpse of this moment and really see it the way it is. And it's unnerving. It's like people who try to quit yoga at some point. They're like, you know, like, you guys didn't realize this. I don't know if I mentioned this, but once you start, you can't really quit. You can. Like, there have been a lot of people, like, if you don't go too deep, you do a yoga practice and then CrossFit comes along and you're like, yoga or CrossFit, I don't know, I might want to take the leap, go to CrossFit. And so people do that. And I've had people even graduate from our training and they like, I'm just going to take a little break. That was really intensive. We were doing a lot. We did a lot of stuff. I'm just take a little break. And then they come back like 4 years later and they're like, can I please jump back in? Can I please, I need to get back to yoga. Because what happened was I took a little break and then next thing I knew, I was drinking at the bar and it was like, yeah, well, I mean, that's okay, blah, blah, this will always be here. But I never was honestly really able to enjoy drinking because I always felt like I should be meditating. So that you have to come back to yoga and do the work so that you can enjoy drinking again. It's true though. So we do these things and we get on this practice and we know that it's aligned. You can feel that this is this practice of being in integrity with myself and being in alignment with myself, so that anything that you do later that's not in alignment with who you are, it feels off. And you know it. You can't quite go back to sleep and just enjoy the things that you used to unconsciously enjoy anymore. So we have to go through the process. Right? What is the practice of yoga? It's ironically, it's the practice of enjoying the present moment. There's no judgment that says you shouldn't drink or that you shouldn't, you know, whatever it is that you want to do. In fact, if you do, this is the practice of really enjoying it. So it's not some type of, you know, moral thing. Right? But this is what happens. This Kundalini gets woken up. We start to get a glimpse, and then it doesn't want to collapse back down into a contracted identity. You see what I'm saying? Like you felt a little taste of freedom somehow, freedom from suffering. It doesn't want to collapse back down into this contracted identity. So once this Kundalini wakes up, especially once it wakes up enough, there's no going back. You can't not do yoga. Right now we can stop doing asana, but the yoga is the yoga is the effort to steady your awareness and catch this and see what's happening. Sometimes plants wake up the Kundalini. So, but they say there's 3, let's see, what can we do here? Oh, look at this. Cool. Let's do this. They say there's 3. Oh, why is that not working? Here we go, draw. 3, I would like that to be red. Let's see if we can format that red. There we go. It's 3 main obstacles. So we have red, orange. That is pink. Let's find orange. There we go. Then we have yellow. So the 3 main obstacles are, of course, what chakra you think they're at? If we were going to be dole them out evenly. So we have 3. We have 1 at root chakra, Muladhara. And this obstacle is, it's the obstacle. These are the obstacles that they're called Granthis, Granthis. It's in your pranayama description. I think we may have talked about these a little bit with pranayama. So these Granthis, this blocks the Kundalini from going any further. And so this Granthi, this knot, it means a knot, like a psychic knot, an entanglement, a circuit, a closed circuit energy loop. There are stories like I can't, this is a little Granthis. But these are 3 major Granthis that are associated with the Bandhas. And so the first Granthi at root chakra is, I think I am the body. Can you imagine how limiting that would be to think you are the body? Like a lot of times we do think we are the body, but most of us, if we're paying attention, we know we're not just the body. Like, imagine if you thought you were your car. Like you really thought you were your car. You'd drive to the grocery store and you'd be like, oh, I can't go in because I am my car. I'm stuck in here, right? You'd think you were stuck in the car. Same thing if we thought we were the body. Right? Most people that we know nowadays, they don't think they are the body. They know they dream. You go beyond the body when you dream. That's an experience that you have that's beyond the body. And in a dream, you can fly. Right? You can be 2 places at once. So our body is extended. So now I might think that I'm my reflection on the Zoom screen, right? But I don't think I'm just my body. Because if I was just my body, how could we talk right now in this way? Your body's not here. So we've realized that there's more to us, right? There's information that we are. So, but it's very limiting to think I am just my body. The next one is Manipura. So we skipped Svadhisthana and we're moving to Manipura, which is the blockage. This Granthi is, I am my identity. I am my role. I am a yoga teacher. Right? I am a doctor. Right? I am a psychologist. There's like a cliche there of like someone who's like, the dad is a psychologist and the family's like, you can't just bring that home. Like, stop trying to psychoanalyze me, dad. Right? Because you got to leave that at work. That's not who you're. My dad. That's the role you're playing for me. You're not my psychologist. Right? Or this happens in all these different ways when people can't drop their role. Right? Or we project these roles onto other people. So we think that I am my role. I am my race, my gender, my sexual orientation. I am my political affiliation. Have you ever known anyone like that? Who is like, like somehow like they identify as being either Democrat or Republican. And so you say some little thing and suddenly like it's attack on Democrats or Republicans. It's like, and then all of a sudden the situation is escalated and it's like, whoa, can't we just have like a conversation? Like if we're both seekers of truth, we should be able to talk, even if you identify as a donkey or an elephant, you know, in these types of ways. And so this happens, this identification with things like religion too. Sometimes people think I am a Christian. I can't go to the dance. Right? My religion forbids dancing. So these are obstacles. Turns out you're not your role. And it's a huge relief to realize, holy smokes, I'm not my personality. Like I can just show up here however I feel like. I don't have to, like that's a nice thing that people notice about masters a lot. I don't have to be consistent from one day to the next. Like if I just feel like being like this today, that's how I'm gonna be. I don't have to try to fit into your expectations of who you think I am. I don't have to try to fit into the roles of who I perceive that other people think I am. I don't have to fit into the role for what society says that a mom is, or what society says that a dad is, or what society says a yogi is. Right? That's another one. Sometimes people get into that role and they're like, I'm a yogi. I wear beads. You know, I'm vegetarian, blah, blah, blah. That was a hard one for me. When I went vegan, I didn't identify as vegan at first. It was just like a thing. But after I'd been vegan for like, 10 years, I remember I had to get some meat. A friend of mine was like, I want meat, and couldn't get it for herself. So she was like, will you go buy meat for me? And I was like, okay. And so I went to the co-op and I was going to get some bison steak. And I felt like kind of like embarrassed to buy meat because I'm like, I'm a vegan. Like somehow I had started to identify as that. And so buying meat and purchasing it, there was like something that I needed to do. Well, anyway, when I stopped being a vegan still, like when I had eaten meat for the first time, I felt like the need to like write a blog post about it and be like, hey, I know you guys all like know that I'm vegan and everything, but like, like I just want everyone to know that I ate meat and I'm like, I can't really identify as vegan anymore. And you know what people thought about it? They didn't care at all. Nobody cared. Like it was only a big deal to me. No one else was like paying any attention to what I ate. Right. So, but that's how it is a lot of times is we go to the nightclub or you don't do that anymore. But back in the day, we'd go to the nightclub and some people would dance and someone else would be like, I don't want to dance because everyone will be watching me dance. Is that really what's happening? No one's watching you dance. Unless you're an amazing dancer, probably no one's watching you dance. So that's the way it is. It's a huge relief to realize, holy smokes, I'm not my personality. I don't have any responsibility to this persona. Now it's helpful to have a persona. If you were at a party and someone came up to you and you're like, hey, my name's Matt, what's your name? And they're like, I don't have a name. You'd be like, oh, okay. Oh, well, what do you do? I just am. All right. I'm going to go get a drink or whatever, it's a little awkward. And so it's helpful to be able to play the role and have a persona and keep your persona and be skillful with it and be like, okay, I'm Matt, yoga Matt. It's kind of cheesy. But it's a nice role that I can always like utilize. And then, maybe someone remembers, that and you can use it as a vehicle for your spirit in the world. But if you think I am your role, you're so trapped. It's like a prison. So it's very freeing to realize, holy smokes, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not Matt. That's just a name my mom named these cells, these ancestrally, ancestrally, this information that's been carried through time, this body. She's like, we'll call you Matt. And in Spanish, we remember that too, because we don't say I am Jose. We say what? Me llamo. Yeah.
I'm called.
I'm called. Yeah, I'm called Jose. So that puts it into a little clearer perspective. So this is the blockage, thinking I am Jose. I am Matt. I am my role. And then this last one, so then we have anahata. And then finally, vishuddha. And this final blockage comes at vishuddha. And it has to do with, so in order to get to the third eye, we understand is everything. The third eye sees everything because it is the experience of not being separate from anything. So it sees all perspectives simultaneously. I'm just sharing this metaphysically with you. So it's an understanding of the third eye. There's a little bit of logic here. But of course, this is all stuff that is something that makes sense from a meditative perspective. Otherwise, it's just like blah, blah, blah. So the throat is the last holdout for any type of individuality. There's a block here. Is that I'm not you. As long as I insist that somehow I'm not the other, there is an other who I'm not. So this is the importance of yamas and niyamas here. Because if I've been hurting this reflection of myself, it's going to be harder for me to identify and remember that it is me. When we see that, for instance, with meat. If I eat meat all the time, and then someone says, hey, you're hurting animals, that can sound really threatening. It's like you're challenging this. So we vegetarian for a while, and then all of a sudden we start to have this compassion comes back through. Another way, satya. We talked about ahimsa, satya, lying. So if I have secrets that I don't want you to know about, I'm going to have a really hard time merging with the self that we share, right? I'm going to insist that no, we're separate, and you can't see in my experience and I can't see in yours, right? Because I have things I don't want you to know. They're hidden. So the medicine for that is honesty. It's honesty. It's good to be honest, like really good to be honest with your family, your friends, the people in your life. Like that's a good one. And then also in this moment right now, to be honest with yourself, to be transparent with God. Like that song, sometimes I sing this in Shavasana, but it goes, Gran Espíritu, gran abuela, como soy, me presento ante ti. Great Spirit, great grandfather, great grandmother, as I am, I present myself to you. Not as a perfected yogi, but as I am. As I am, I'm not perfect. I do things that, like, I lie. I try not to, but sometimes I lie. I try not to, but sometimes I hurt others. I try not to, but sometimes I steal things. Sometimes I have mean thoughts, all of these things. But grandfather, you understand, right? Because you were like me once too. So there's no shame in any of this. And that's it. And that's a big part, is letting go of the shame. We talk about compassion, forgiveness, self-love as a way of letting go of any resistance to who's here, so we can really be transparent in this moment. And that transparency on the upside is your ability to become absorbed into this moment. Does that make sense? Any questions about any of this? So, back to the bandhas. The bandhas correspond to these three Granthis. Mula bandha corresponds to the root one, I am the body. Udiyana corresponds to I am my role. And Vishuddha corresponds, or the Jalandhara corresponds to the Vishuddha one, which is I'm not you. So that's one of the esoteric descriptions of why bandhas. It's also why we relax. You can see that transparency is a relaxing. It's not a perfection, or it is a resting into the perfection that's already here. Resting into the perfection of who you already are. And we realize that this being a human is a work in progress. Right? We're growing. Of course, when you were a little kid, you used to throw sand at other little kids, or steal things, steal candy, or other types of things that we did. But then as we get older, we learn to be better. When we were a little bit older, we made other mistakes, and then as time goes on, we learn and we try to do better and better. Does that make sense? No one expects a little kid to be perfect. But this is part of this coming of age, of this growing. And so if we realize that, like, here we are, am I perfect? No. Am I trying to be better? Yes. And that way we can meet this spirit, which is yourself, right? Which is yourself, which is your ancestors. This spirit, which is the spirit that all of us share. Right? So we can surrender to that. Now, it's very practical. It was just Dia de los Muertos, and we think a lot about our individual identity, and then, but the fact of it is that we all die. As individuals, we all die. And so, when we die, and when our friends and our family die, and life goes on, this is a very practical part of life. This is something that happens. So we've seen it. We've seen our friends die. We've seen our family die. And somehow life goes on. So someday, you're going to experience that too. You're going to experience, oh my gosh, I'm dying, or something. Like maybe I'm sick, or I'm hurt, or whatever it is. I'm losing control of something that I thought was mine. So this part of life, it's coming. So it behooves us to connect with this, what we're calling the spirit, the self we share. It behooves us to connect to this non-selfish perspective, because that's what's left when what we had been identifying with, the ego, right, the identification with the temporary stuff, when that falls away, what's left is who we are, the self we share. We call it Prakriti, the Divine Mother. We call it life. Life goes on. Life doesn't die just because an individual person dies. Life goes on. So this bandhas, this practice of bandhas, of entering through something that's gross and recognizing it as ever more subtle. So practice to keep recognizing the subtle. It keeps going in the direction of the subtle. All the gross stuff, what happens to it? We have to let it go. It's not a sad thing. I mean, it is a sad thing, but it's not a morbid realization. The way that it's described in the yoga context, it's not like, oh my God, everyone dies. It's so horrible. It's really inspiring. It's an invitation to enjoy, to appreciate, to be who you really are. Like, it's an invitation to not do things that you don't want to do. I remember the day I came up with my retirement plan. I was studying, and there was this king. I can't remember his name. I could find it, but I'm not going to go to the link. So there's this king, and he's a famous king in the tradition, and he had put up all these stone pillars around India with these words of truth, the scriptures written in many different languages, and he was considered to be very just and kind, and it was a good time for the people. And so when he got old, he passed along his crown. And so, we're used to, like, when a president isn't the president anymore, what do? Golf. Yeah, hang out at like luxury places still with Secret Service and bodyguards, and like, eat fine foods and go to, like, I don't know, like Bohemian Grove or, Illuminati parties or whatever they do. I don't know. But this guy, this king, he took off all his robes, his crown and everything, and he got just a blanket and a begging bowl, and he walked out onto the street to wander for the rest of his life. No more eating rich meals. And so we've been kind of like brainwashed, like that's the point of life, is to work and save enough money so that we can spend our senior years on a golf course. So, but that's not in the Vedic tradition. There's this system. So I think it's called the Gurakshalam system, but 0 to 25 is brahmacharya. 25 to 50 is householder, having kids, raising kids. 50 to 75 is like you start to renounce the world, but you still have your partner, your husband, your wife, right? But you start to renounce the world. And then 75 to 100, it's like a swami, and you renounce the world. So it's this gradual process of letting go, disentangling from your stuff from your things. I'm sure not everyone does that, but yeah, it's helpful to have a model for that. I bet it would help a lot of these people who are feeling empty towards the end of life. It's like, how many fancy dinners can I eat? I'm still never satisfied, you know? So what's that?
I said we were just unpacking here in our country house and having that experience. I was unpacking all my fancy clothes and dresses and going, I'm gonna have nowhere to wear these anymore. And my husband was unpacking his closet and he's like, oh my God, I never want to see this tie again. And these suits, I'm throwing them out. I never want to go to another fancy fundraiser. I am so happy to be out of the city.
Thank God. So this forest dwellers, you're becoming forest dwellers.
A little bit, yeah, we're trying it.
What can I ask how old you are?
51.
Wow.
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
This is resonating here.
Let me look it up. Let me see if I can find this. Is this right? I think I got it right. Let me see. No. Look. Let me see. Let me ask the teacher real quick. I don't know. So, but I just texted my teacher to see if I can find the exact name so I can, you might be interested in reading about it.
Sure.
So any thoughts, questions about any of this? We introduced a bunch of stuff today. Teaching the bandhas, don't really need to say this, but it's a really personal practice, right? Now we don't even do yoga adjustments, but I used to always say, your teacher should not show you where your bandhas are, right? You find that for yourself. Something no one knows if you're doing it or not. No one knows if you're practicing the bandhas.
I mean, if you think about it, a lot of them are very similar to like what you would practice for physical therapy.
Tell me about that.
Well, like the engaging the core and sucking in and up. Like
Yeah.
I've been having back trouble, right? So I've been going to PT, and I mean, he keeps and he's like, well, when do you injure it? I'm like, oh, walking, and he's like, well, engage your core. Make sure you engage your glutes, your butt. He's like, we don't use our butt enough, so use your butt when you're walking. I'm like, yeah. I'm listening to the bandhas. I'm like, oh yeah, same thing, right?
Yeah, it is. So that's when we say tuck the tailbone, engage your abdominal muscles. We don't say exclude or explicitly engage your glutes, but that's what happens if you engage your abdominal muscles too. So, in practical terms, these are injury prevention.
Right, but also when you're doing your Mula Bandha, you're engaging your glute. I mean, when you're sucking in your anus, you're engaging your glutes at the same time.
Could be. Now it'll be interesting to see. Like, keep practicing and see if you can relax your glutes and engage your Mula Bandha. So we were doing a practice where we were lifting Mula Bandha and engaging and releasing Uddiyana Bandha. I think we were doing my mind tonight. I keep thinking about other stuff that's in the background, and it's like I can't remember any names. We were doing I don't remember, but it's a practice where it's like the Nauli, except you exhale the breath out, and then I'm gonna have to tip this up. How do I do this? So you exhale the breath out, and then you it's called Agnisara, right? Agnisara, purification by fire, but it's not that bad as it sounds. So Agnisara, so we were doing Agnisara, keeping Mula Bandha lifted, engage, and release Uddiyana Bandha while you're holding the breath out. And a student came up to me later and said, I can't do that every time I engage or release Uddiyana Bandha. Mula Bandha has to go with it. Keep practicing it for a while. So a few months later, she came back and was like, oh my God, I can engage and release Uddiyana Bandha and keep Mula Bandha lifted. So these are, I don't know what you call that. Like, we have hand-eye coordination. So this is Bandha mind coordination. You know, when you, so it's like one of those things where you, you know, people, they like say, you know, move just your ring finger without moving your other finger or whatever it is. And, you know, and we can't do that. But if you keep practicing, right, you gain this coordination with these things. So I don't know. I think that's enough said about that stuff. It's just like something to practice. It's good one to share. It is a good one to share with your students. Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha. I share that from day one. I don't go into a lot of depth, you know, because obviously if you got people coming in and it's their first yoga class and all of a sudden you're like, screws your anus, or, you know, whatever it is, it can sound like a little bit like they feel funny about it. They don't understand the context or whatever. And we live in such a repressed society that it could give someone, you know, an awkward feeling or something like that. So a lot of times I'll talk about the bandhas. And if someone's new in class, I guess it depends. If there's like their first yoga class, probably not going to go into a ton of detail, but I'll still mention the bandhas for everyone else in class. They just won't know. But if someone keeps coming back, eventually, okay, this is what Mula Bandha is. This is what Uddiyana is. And then we just, you know, you keep going over it and we keep engaging, practicing it. So, yeah, it's fun. Sometimes do sun salutations. Like, okay, can you keep your bandhas engaged for an entire sun A? Like, let's try it. Did it work? Only you know. And then we try again. And so, you know, and it's tricky sometimes. Like you like start with your bandhas engaged and somewhere through you forget. So, you know, these are kind of fun practices that you can do with the bandhas, things like that.
Is there anything to be said about, like, I know like practicing asana and pranayama should be done on an empty stomach. Is the same thing kind of go with the bandhas?
The bandhas. So I think we talked about this. Let me go back to the share screen. So we have our whiteboard here. And so remember when we are doing these practices, what direction we want Kundalini to go up. Actually, we want it to go up Sushumna Nadi, but this is just a directional arrow, right? We want it to go up, but there's also a capacity that it has to go down. So can anyone name a directional energy that goes from the mouth to the anus that goes down?
Like is it apana?
Yes, that's right. That's what, so absolutely, that's apana. Apana. No, you're right, apana. Yeah, I think that's more, I think that's a better pronunciation. No, I feel like people always say apana, but I think it's actually probably apana. Apana vayu. So we have apana vayu, which is, they say, goes kind of from the throat. Why can't I move this apana? There we go. Can I move it? Nope. So that kind of goes, so we have apana vayu, which goes down like this from somewhere around the heart down. And then we have prana vayu. So I was going to just say digestion, right? Because when we digestion, we put food in, it goes through us and it comes out. You guys know how digestion works. But that same energy that goes down can also, if we're feeling sick or something else, nervous, it can come up, right? And so that energy can go up or down. And so let me delete. So we have pranavayu, which, let's do like this. So we have pranavayu, which goes in through the mouth. Is this, oh, this is which goes in through the mouth and then down to here. And then we have apana vayu, which goes the rest of the way. So the goal of the practice then is to turn apana vayu upwards and connect it with pranavayu, which should carry the Kundalini. Now this all sounds, again, kind of like metaphysical, but it is practical. And so if you've ever eaten before class, you know what we're talking about. If you just ate a burrito before yoga class, it feels like there's a war going on in your stomach, more so than other things that you could do. Like sometimes you can eat a burrito and maybe go canoeing or go for, a walk, and it's not going to do too much damage. But when you're doing these practices that direct energy is going up, but you have something going down, that's going to be blocking that energy. So when we're on an empty stomach and we do these practices that direct energy going up, in practical terms, that means consciousness is really conducive for doing a meditation practice. Like there's a zone. It's a thing that you can experience. That happens. It just happens naturally. That's part of the body. Is that when we're on this empty stomach, and that upward flow is activated, you're in this type of peak performance place. So I think I would do this before I even really understood the purpose of it. Is I would sometimes not eat breakfast because I do 6 a.m. yoga, and then I teach the 10 o'clock, and then I teach the 12 o'clock. And so I wouldn't really eat until, because I could have eaten like in between there somewhere, but then you feel like, it's this lower energy. So I would wait and not eat until later and be so sharp all day on an empty stomach, and then eat afterwards. And it was really good for the practice to be, because I'd practice and I'd do the 6 a.m. practice until time to teach the 10, and then the 12, and so these are some of the things that, I discovered. And then, okay, here we go. This is described in the the Pradipika. This is described in the Hatha Yoga tradition, these things. So meditation, yoga, these things on an empty stomach, it helps. Can you be enlightened on a full stomach? It's harder. Like if you just ate a big heavy meal and you want to try to stay really awake, really present, it's harder. It is, I guess, depending on what you eat. Like, man, especially this time of year, like all the squash and potatoes and everything, it's just like, oh, I just want to lay down. I just want to go to sleep. And I actually have to make a conscious effort. Like tonight, I knew I was going to be teaching from 6 to 9. So I tried to eat my meal beforehand. And I have to be conscious not to eat too much, or else it's going to be really, I will want to sleep instead of teaching yoga this time of year, especially as it gets dark by 6 and, you know, all of these things. So, yeah, the eating appropriately really helps the practice, even teaching. Because I want to be able to be somehow connected to the frequency myself. And so the heavier I eat, the harder it's going to be to get into the zone with that. So I know that in practical terms for myself. Any other thoughts here about bandhas? I think we did a lot of good, covered a lot of good stuff. Bandhas, mudras. We're going to I'll go into more depth with the chakras here presently. Trying to think, is there anything, other questions you guys have tonight? We talked about this fasting. Is anyone doing the fasting this week? Not really. No, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. It's a cold time of year to fast in some ways, but I know that as the seasons change and all of these things, a little bit of fasting, even just a day or two of fasting, day or 3, can make a huge difference in transitioning through the seasons gracefully and feeling good, keeping the immune system high. So,
are we going to talk more about mudras with the hands?
yeah, we could talk more about mudras with the hands. So there's a lot of mudras with the hands that you could figure out. My teachers didn't really teach me much about mudra. I never have had a breakdown. I know some people, they say that certain mudras for certain chakras or certain, you know, like all of these different things. I've never had that broken down for me. The way that it was described to me was that it's something that is received spontaneously, that instead of trying to do a mudra, mudras are something that happens and it unfolds on its own. And so, you know, I guess that's what I know. Mudras, they're not just the hands. Like for instance, Shambhavi mudra is looking at the third eye. And so Shambhavi mudra is considered to be turning your gaze to third eye, but Shambhavi is Shiva. So Shambhavi being turning your gaze towards pure awareness, turning your inner gaze towards pure awareness. Kechari mudra, which is taking your tongue and putting it behind the soft palate up into the nasal cavity. So you probably remember in the Pradipika, they say what you do is you take a razor blade and you cut that thing at the base of your tongue, just a little bit every day, and put golden seal on it. Again, we don't do that. In the tradition that way it's been described to me, they said you don't have to cut the base of your tongue with a razor blade, which makes sense to me. And so I was just told that it happens spontaneously. And that one, I can say that one day that was something that I was like, oh, I can't imagine doing that. What does that even mean? And then one day I just was like, oh, I can do that. My tongue goes up, my nasal cavity now. So, there's different ways that's practiced. Like the way I was originally taught Ketcheri was like retroflexing the tongue, like touching the soft palate with the tongue. I don't know. These are interesting practices to sit in Mahamudra, to sit with the spine straight, engage all the bandhas, hold the breath out at the bottom, engage all the bandhas. And you could do the Kachari mudra too. These are very sacred postures, very subtle postures. Now, if you come to my class, we do that almost every class. We practice this just a little bit in a gentle way, holding the breath out, engaging the bandhas. So these mudras, I don't know what more to say about them, honestly. My sense is that they're like sorcery, things. So if someone was a master of mudra, they could be like, and the stone would dissolve. They could open a door or whatever it is. That's not something that I've experienced in my practice. Like me personally, how I've experienced mudras is, you may have noticed that when I talk, my hands, and once I start thinking about it, like if I'm talking about mudras, it's the wrong time to tell you. But when I'm talking about yoga, the hands will do things, and they'll go into these positions and they'll do that. Sometimes if I'm practicing my hands, I'll just do that, and it just feels like not something that I'm doing for any reason that I really know why, other than it feels like a completion of the energy. Like somehow it enhances the energy that's already there in the posture. So it's something that I've experienced in that sense. The mudras, the Vajroli, the Ashwini, those are considered mudras. Mudra is like a mood, right? So a mudra is like a mood. It's like a state of consciousness in that sense. So like Karani mudra is, it's like shoulder stand sort of. Let's see if we can find an image of it. So it's like shoulder stand, but you're holding your back. Can you guys see this?
No, we're still on the whiteboard.
Okay. Stop share, screen share. So here is Karani Mudra. It's like shoulder stand. Here we go. So what makes this a mudra instead of an asana? I asked my teacher that, and he said it's that when you do this as a mudra, you imagine hot red liquid current coming down the spine. So the mudra involves visualization. Here's Shambhavi. This is about mudras. Here. Here's Shambhavi, Kechari, Mulabandha. Vishuddhi. So here's the chakras. Yeah, I like these illustrations. I've seen these before. Not all in one place though. So it's kind of nice. So he's doing the so here is you guys have seen this Muladhara. This is the Maha Mudra. Maha Mudra. So we've got the Shambhavi, the Kechari, and the Mulabandha, and the Uddiyana Bandha. And then you can see he's sitting on his heel. So you put the seat under the anus, right? So these are, you'll see these in the Pradipika. Siddhasana. It's different. They have a description in there of what's called Yoni Siddhasana, which is just to say that it's a Siddhasana that's for a female body instead of a male body. Siddhasana, I speak to doing a practice of Siddhasana for many years myself, and I'd heard from my teacher that Siddhasana will take away your ability to have kids. And, you know, if you do too much Siddhasana. So Siddhasana is sitting on the heel, but it's placing the heel kind of like under like the urethra. So it's pressing up. And so what I realized with this Siddhasana is it literally cuts off the blood flow or the energy flow to your genitals. So it literally could take away your ability to have kids. And then you have to decide how much Siddhasana do I want to do. And so, you know, these practices, they're like energetic and they have a practical effect too. So in this Maha Mudra, this practice that we saw the picture of, it's in the Pradipika too. The heel goes under your body somehow, and then the leg extends and you reach for the toe. Take a breath in, exhale the breath out, engage the bandhas, the Jalandhara bandha, turn the inner gaze, Shambhavi Mudra, right, Bindu, and focus upon the Supreme. What happened? So these are, we know what I could say about this. Like again, to talk about a practice like that is pretty meaningless. But to do a practice like that, but what I could say about it is that what we know is that when we inhale life, and then you inhale and you have a body and the world and everything, and then when we exhale out all the air, that's in this direction through death, right? Or to be more honest, like that's the resting state of the breath, is no breath. Samadhi, the breathless state. And so as we start to consider what's there, now it's not a physical consideration. This is the withdrawing of identification from physicality and all of these things. So as we go into these practices, I again, it's like you have to do them. And two, they're like sorcery practices, and what they point to is so, I mean, they don't really talk about that, but it's so beyond the nature of what we think we are and what we think this is. It's like if someone had like a Stargate. So here's a yoga posture that's like a Stargate, but you can't just do it and like blah, 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 and it's easy. There's a trick to it. There's the repetition, it's understanding. It's not that it's not working. It's not that the Stargate's not working. It's that I'm so used to identifying with form and matter that I don't recognize what's here. So here's a practice which harmonically and in the key of frequency and all of these things, we call this Mahamudra, right? The great mudra. In the key of all of these things, it's harmonically attuned to you recognizing or recognizing the nature of this moment to see what's actually here. And we've tried to put it into words, different times, different places. What's here? Well, not this individual perspective, what we call waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, and void. That's a more accurate description of what's actually here, is this interweaving these layers of waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, and the void. So then, we ask the question, who are you? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I if I'm not the body? Who am I if I'm not limited to space? Who am I beyond time? So these are practices that point to this beyond time space. Is that enough said about the mudras? I feel like I like, part of me likes to talk about this stuff, and then somehow it gets ridiculous too. And it's like we just also have to do a practice for it to really have any merit. Because I could be like, this is the most, and that's what they do in the Pradipika. They're like, this is the most, this is the Pradipika here? Oh no. They're like, this is the most amazing posture. It cures death. It cures death. It makes you immortal. And that's literally what it is that the posture is designed to do. But yet when we're reading it, we're like, it sounds like you're selling snake oil. I don't understand. It cures death. It cures all disease. It's like, so what do you say about these? Like that's a pretty accurate and poignant thing to say about these yoga practices, but what can you really say about it? Because that's not the point. We could say that it's immortality, but who wants immortality? The ego is the only one concerned about immortality. So it's a funny thing. It's like, this is the punchline, is that, yeah, samadhi yoga is available to you, but you will never experience samadhi yoga, because as long as I'm identified with limitation, that's the opposite of it. Matt will never experience it. This individual identification will never experience the supreme being that we share, because as long as I think I am that, that's just waking up from the illusion that I never was that. You see what I'm saying? He never was Matt. That was only ever an illusion, a fiction that we'd all somehow agreed to play along with, that wasn't really serving any of us. And so, yeah, the ego, it's exhausting, tiring, uninspiring. Uninspiring.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So Jalandhara Bandha, opening and closing the throat, tuck of the chin, so I feel like in resting state, my throat it's not like actively open or closed, but then when I'm concentrating on it, I can both open it wider or close it. So when you're engaging Jalandhara Bandha, is it either or, the opening wider? Okay.
It's either or. Yep. It's also, I think of Jalandhara Bandha also as the Ujjayi breath. So you're actively engaging. It's like, so these bandhas, the thing about the bandhas is, again, like we start out being like, engage your bandhas all the time, engage, and lift your bandhas in this posture, lift. And that's good. But again, we also want to be able to relax. And so what it is like, eventually what we realize with the bandhas is we have a capacity to use these energies. And it's good to know how to use these energies, like for all kinds of reasons. It's like learning how to use your car. Like this is learning how to use your sexual organs. Right? This is learning how to direct your energy. And that sounded like, I hate when people say that, because for years I was like, what do you mean direct energy? I was like, what are you talking about directing energy? Because you'd be reading about these practices and they'd say direct your energy, instead of it going out as lust, or instead of your energy going out as desire or whatever it is, direct that energy up your spine. I'm like, what do you mean? But it is literally that. It's literally directing your energy to your higher centers. If you understand the chakra system, it's choosing a focus. Like this is a systematic way that we try to do it in the practice, is surrender to the supreme being that we are. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. May this body, this heart, this mind be the vehicle for all beings everywhere being happy and free. How can I be of service right now? Is there a way I can hold my attention right now that is of service to other people? Because if I'm in my ego, not really serving. Is there a better, it's subtle, but is there a better way that I can hold my attention that better serves others? That's where the question each of us has to answer. And yeah, there is. Yeah, it is. There is a better way. That way, yoga. Any more questions before we wrap up here? We got 2 minutes left. I don't think we get the election results tonight because of all the mail voting. So that's okay.
I heard not till the end of the week.
Not till the end of the week?
Mm-hmm.
If then.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing we have yoga. Yep. So yeah, stock up on groceries and watch out. That's what I know. Mm-hmm. We'll talk. We can talk about chakras coming up here. I'm sure it's got to be coming up close, and then we're going to be getting into these other things. Yeah. If you have more questions about Bandhas Mudras, Justin is a good person to talk to too. Also too, because she'll also have like a female perspective on Bandhas and Mudras too, and so you can maybe go more in depth and ask her, about her experience practicing, because I know she has a personal practice of that. And that's more valuable to me. That's more valuable than any book that you can read on something, is actually someone when they have a personal practice of something, and you can say, okay, what's your experience of this? That's very interesting. So till next time, namaste. Have a beautiful rest of your week. I hope to see you in class this week. I'm going to a friend is having a coming of age ceremony on Saturday. So I'll be gone Saturday and probably be gone Sunday, or else I'll be Zooming on Sunday. But it's probably going to be Scarlett with you all. So till next time, namaste.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks.